This is the first quilt for 2024. It's called Birds in the Air, and if you're interested to see how I made this one, please continue watching. It will probably look more effective if the birds are flying in that direction. So what I'm going to do now is take a photo of this so that will be ready to go on the community page, and then I'm going to get a red pen and I'm going to grid this up. I'm going to be working in 2x2 blocks, so there'll be 4 3-inch squares. So now what I'm going to do is look for identical blocks across the quilt. So that's my little puzzle of the day complete. I've gridded that into 2x2 squares, and I've worked out now how many squares we need of each. There are 144 2x2 blocks, and we've got all the different designs of blocks there, A through to F, and the quantity that we need. But the first thing I'm going to do is make a collection of 306 blue and white half square triangles and 270 blue squares, both finishing at 3-inch. And these are all the blues that I've taken from my stash. So we have already some 3-inch squares prepared. There are some fat quarters and there's a little bit of yardage. I'll start cutting. Well, I've come into my sewing room. It's nice and early. I finished cutting all the pieces out that I need for this quilt last night, and now it's time to get my sewing machine out. But before I do that, I thought we'd have a little chat about productivity. One of the questions I sometimes get asked is, how do I manage to make so many quilts? And I never really thought about it. Last year I made 28. There were different sizes, some were larger, some were smaller. But that wasn't the only sewing I did. I did other things as well. And today I thought I'd share with you some of my tips. And so I think before I can get into that, I'll give you a little bit of my background. And I think that explains how I sew so many so fast. And I'll share that with you now. So I think I need to go right back to the beginning when I was 16 and I had just left school. Well, I had an apprenticeship starting in September and I finished school in the July. So I decided I would get a summer job, and I applied for a job in a sewing factory where they made soft toys, and I got it. I got the job. So when I turned up and they asked me if I could sew, I said yes. So they pointed me into the direction of a huge faff industrial machine. It was enormous. And they said, well, go ahead, show us what you can do. So I did. Anyway, they seemed pleased. They gave me the job and I learnt how to use that machine. I absolutely loved that machine. It was as old as the hills, but I loved it. And so I worked there for the summer. So each morning I would turn up for work and I would have next to my machine a box of bear skins, and you just sewed them together. Then they went off to quality control. If everything was okay, they would go forward to the next process. If they weren't, they would come back to you. You'd have to unpick them, correct them, send them back again. So pretty soon I learnt accuracy, because I didn't like unpicking, and I think that is my number one tip. When you're sewing, try and be as accurate as you can, obviously, because picking does take a lot of time, and I don't tend to do that much unpicking. I always do some, but not that much. So tip number one is to try and sew accurately. So in this workplace, you had 2 tiers of being paid. You had a basic pay, a flat rate they called it, or you had something called a piecework rate. Wow, I was quite happy to be on the flat rate until I discovered this piecework rate. And in essence, what that meant was each box of work was given a price. So if you completed that box without mistakes, you got paid whatever value that box was worth. And if I did 2 of those in a day, I'd get paid for 2 boxes. But if you work faster and I got 3 boxes completed in a day, I'd get paid for 3 boxes. And so it wasn't long before I found out that I could sew really quickly on this huge industrial sewing machine without making mistakes. And I started earning lots and lots of money. So the way to achieve speedy sewing is to look for economy when piecing. So I would look at my batch of work in front of me and I would think, okay, there's a rhythm when you sew. The music was playing on the radio, people were chatting, it was a really lovely atmosphere. I loved working there, the people were fantastic. And so you sat there and you developed this rhythm. So I would look at this teddy bear batch and I would think, okay, what shall I do? I'll do the teddy bear ears first. So I would put my teddy bear ear shape under the machine, put my finger on one corner and zoop, 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 and just have them. They'd just be going. So I learnt to pick up with my left hand, flip it round with my right hand. So then chain piecing, another speedy way. So I tend to do that now with my quilts. Where possible, I look for economy of sewing, speed of sewing. Ultimately, that means chain piecing. And I think time and energy are the 2 most important things that I have in my sewing room, especially as I'm getting older. Time I might have a little bit more of, but energy, that seems to wax and wane. So it's understanding your own energy levels and how best to work with those. So for example, I tend to be high in energy of a morning, so I like to have my sewing room set up, everything ready to go. On an evening, when I haven't so much energy, that's when I'll do the prep work. I can cut okay, I'm all right cutting fabric of an evening, filling bobbins, cleaning mats, anything that needs to be done that's time consuming but doesn't take a lot of concentration for me, I'll do that of an evening. If I'm basting a quilt, I'll base that on an afternoon or an evening, and I very, very rarely baste and then quilt straight afterwards because, again, as I'm older, I find it quite tiring, especially across the shoulders and the arms, and so I will prepare the quilt the night before, the day before, and then first thing in the morning I can come in and start quilting, and I'll know I'll have enough energy to get that quilted in that day. And also I've arranged my days, I suppose, slightly differently. There was a time when I would get up of a morning and start doing all the housework, but now why do I need to do it of a morning when I've got my precious energy that needs to be going on my sewing machine? So if I need to clean the bathroom, for example, I'll clean it of an evening. If I want to do some cooking, I tend to do batch cooking. That's another good time saver. I quite enjoy cooking when I'm in the mood, and I cook from scratch. So normally I do a day or a morning when I'm doing a lot of batch cooking, and then they're in the freezer ready to go. So on a day when I've been sewing and had a good day sewing, I don't need to stop to prepare a meal. I just need to take it out the freezer. It's all ready to go when we're ready to eat. So think about your own circumstances. Think about the things that you find tiring, things that you can do, that you need to do with high energy, things that you can do when you have lower energy, and work around that. And I do have another life to fit in around my sewing. I have family, I have a house to keep, I have a garden to keep, all the usual things. And so I found a rhythm of working that suits me. So have a look at your own timetable, see what you can shift around. Who knows? Maybe you'll be a midnight gardener. And so I think really that is the secret to my speed. But I'll show you in this design of this birds in the air how I achieve speediness in construction. So if you look at this design, you can see they are 9 patches on point. So I could make all of those blocks and then put another block in between and join them on the diagonal like that. So that's probably a better shot. So you can see that could be a 9 patch on point, and then you would sew on diagonals. However, because I wanted each of these little squares here to be 3 inches and these to be half square triangles, then I'm constructing it in a slightly different way. So I'll take you over here slowly. So for example, block A is 4 3-inch squares joined together, and that is a corner block like that. So I'm going to construct this quilt in lots and lots, well 144 actually, of these 4 blocks. But if I was going to create this quilt in just 2 colours, say white and navy blue, and the background was all the same, I would construct that in a different way. That would be 5.5 by 5.5. That would be 5.5 by 3, and then I would have a 3-inch and then a 3-inch half square triangle. So you can see how you can adapt. So I wanted to use all my scraps, so I am looking to put this together in the quickest way and to utilise all the fabric. And so to get to those blocks, I've then thought about the fabric. So I need 306 blue and white half square triangles, 3 inches. I need 270 3-inch squares in a blue fabric, and I'm going to construct my 3-inch half square triangles in the method where I put a 4 3/4 inch piece of fabric down, blue, then the white on top, and I'll sew the 1/4 inch seam all the way around, cut on the diagonal to give me 4 half square triangles. So I need 77 4 3/4 inch blue, 77 4 3/4 inch white to create my half square triangles. So I'll make all these blocks, and then I have to construct this quilt, how to put it together. So if I show you here, you can see there's block 1 and I need 4 of these. And so this block 1 is made up of 9 of these various blocks. So I've put them in a layout like that. So I'll construct that square, and then I have a construction grid. So I know, looking at this quilt here, I've broken it down, simplified it into a 4x4 block, and I need to create 4 of number 1 blocks. So they'll go down this left hand side. So I think I'm just trying to emphasize to you how to simplify things. So if you can, when you're creating a block, look and see how will be the simplest way and the quickest way to make the blocks, and then what's the simplest and the quickest way of assembling them. And so really it's just an economy of time and energy. So those are my little tips for productivity, and I shall continue working that way in 2024. So if you have any other tips that you'd like to share with us, please do put it in the comments and I'll pass them on. And I'm going to get my sewing machine out now because I'm itching to get started. Okay, I'll speak to you later. And this is my lovely sewing room this morning. As you can see, I have a sewing machine out. Very happy about that. I have scissors ready. I have lots of bobbins filled. My fabric is laid out, ready to hand. My cutting mat is there, my cutting tools, and the iron. So everything is ready to go. There's no irritating little stop, so I can have a good run through while I'm high in energy. Okay, let me show you how I've approached this quilt. Because I'm using scraps of blue and I want a good distribution of colour, I thought first of all I'll make these 2x2 blocks, because I know that these are dotted around the quilt. So as long as I've got a good selection of blues in those, I know they'll be well spaced. And so there were 14 of those, and I've created those. So they're complete. And then still working with that same theme of distribution of colour, I've looked at the next block, B, and there's 50 of those. And you can see that there's 2 blocks of 3 inches, and then on the bottom row there's another 3-inch block, and there's a 3-inch half square triangle. So what I've done last night is join together 2 of the 3-inch blocks. So I've got 50 of those they're complete here, and there's a good distribution of colour in those. And so this morning, what I'm going to do now is start creating these half square triangles. So as you can see, I have laid out all of my blue fabric, but I've separated them into the different designs. And that's because I like to work in small batches. So I will do that first design, then I'll press it, cut off the corners, cut on the diagonal, and then I'll move on to the next one. And I like to do it that way for two reasons. The first is I'm not sitting here doing all of those in one go, which I don't mind the sewing, but I don't particularly want to do all that cutting in one go because I find that a little bit of a strain on my wrist. So if I do those in separate batches, it helps with that. But also, if I'm working in one design at a time and I've only got a few minutes spare, I'll come in, do one design, and then go off and do what else I need to do throughout the day. Well, I've prepared all of the 3-inch half square triangles. They're all ready to go. I've also sewn together all of the 3-inch squares that are in twos. So they're all prepped. And now I'm beginning to join these sets of two to a half square triangle that has a 3-inch square on the top. So I'm working on block B, and there's 50 of those. And all I'm trying to do at the moment is to make sure that I don't have the same colours next to each other. So where there's a dot there, I wouldn't put that together like that. I would turn it. So that's all I'm doing at the moment. There is a combination in this quilt of 576 3-inch squares and 3-inch half square triangles. When I come to put the blocks together, the chances are that there will be some colour touching, but I'm trying to avoid that where I can in the construction of these little 2x2 blocks. So I've completed all of block B, and now I'm going to assemble all of these 2 blocks, and they have white triangles touching, so I'm just going to change my thread. So here I have all of those half square triangles sewn together. You can see I think that's the point of the bird's beak. So the first thing I'm going to do is block E. So I need 32 of those. So this is the left hand side of block E, and so I need to put one of these white on the right hand side. So the block will look like that, and that's all of block E complete now. And I do think that the chain piecing helps with the accuracy, so we've got nice little points meeting everywhere. And now I'm going to go and work on block F. So block F is 2 blocks together, and then we have a block like that attached to it. So there's 16 of those. And that's F complete. And now I'm going to go on to C. And C is a 3-inch square with a half square triangle on the bottom, and then 2 of those little birds on the right. And there are 16 of those. And that's all of C complete, and we're on the last block now. And the last block is D. So it's similar to C, that there's a half square triangle, but this one is sitting on top of a 3-inch square. And then we'll take one of these and put that next to that. And we need 16 of those. So that's block D complete. So all of the 2x2 blocks are finished now. And I think we might have a really lovely quilt there. So now I have to construct it, and I'll save that for my next video. I'll share that with you. If you look on my community page, you'll find the plan, the construction blocks and all the design blocks. If you're interested and want to give it a go, use up your scraps. And I think that's it for this week. So thank you very much for your company. It's been lovely chatting to you. If you're not there, then I'm sitting here alone in my room talking to the bookcase. Never mind. And I'll see you next week. Thanks for watching. Take care. Bye.